She never removed the black veil that covered her face, and those who dared ask why were never heard from again. Before we dive into the shadows of Pine Hollow Inn, I want to know, where are you listening to this story from? Are you alone in your room? Perhaps late at night? Or maybe driving through an empty road? Whatever the case, you're about to enter a world where silence speaks louder than screams. If you're enjoying this journey into darkness, please subscribe to the channel, because the truth hidden beneath that veil is waiting, and it demands witnesses. Now let's step into 1899, where a seemingly innocent inn held secrets that would haunt an entire generation. The autumn rain fell heavy over the Pennsylvania countryside as Thomas Whitmore's carriage rolled through the muddy path leading to Pine Hollow Inn. The young journalist from the Philadelphia Chronicle had traveled for 3 days, following rumors that had been whispered in taverns and printed in obscure local gazettes. Stories of disappearances, of guests who checked in but never checked out, of a veiled woman who wandered the halls like a living portrait. Thomas was 26, ambitious, and hungry for the kind of story that would make his name known beyond the city limits. His editor had dismissed the Pine Hollow tales as superstitious nonsense, but Thomas saw opportunity where others saw foolishness. Small-town mysteries sold newspapers, and if he could expose whatever charlatan was behind these theatrical hauntings, his career would soar. The inn emerged from the fog like a skeletal hand reaching from the earth. 3 stories of weathered wood and dark windows, surrounded by pine trees so thick they seemed to swallow the remaining daylight. A single lamp burned in the front entrance, its flame flickering as if struggling against an invisible wind. Thomas stepped down from the carriage, his leather boots sinking into the soft ground. The driver, an older man named Garrett, who'd barely spoken during the journey, handed him his trunk with trembling hands. "You sure about this, Mr. Whitmore?" Garrett's voice was barely above a whisper. "Ain't too late to turn back. There's a proper hotel 15 miles east." "I'm sure," Thomas replied, adjusting his coat. "I'll need you back here in 3 days." Garrett shook his head slowly. 3 days. Right, if you're still here. Before Thomas could respond, the driver had already climbed back onto his seat, urging the horses forward with unusual urgency. Within moments, the carriage disappeared into the mist, leaving Thomas alone before the inn's heavy oak door. He knocked twice. The sound echoed unnaturally, as if the building itself were hollow. The door opened without a creak, smooth, silent, deliberate. A woman stood in the threshold, her figure draped entirely in black fabric. A veil, thick and opaque, covered her face from forehead to chest. Only her pale hands were visible, folded gently at her waist. "Good evening." Her voice emerged soft, yet clear, with a strange quality that made Thomas think of distant bells. "You must be Mr. Whitmore. We've been expecting you." Thomas felt a chill run down his spine, though he couldn't explain why. "You knew I was coming? We know when someone seeks answers." She stepped aside, gesturing for him to enter. "Please, come in from the cold." The interior of Pine Hollow Inn was surprisingly well kept. Polished wooden floors, brass fixtures that gleamed in the lamplight, walls adorned with paintings of pastoral scenes. A grandfather clock stood in the corner of the lobby, its pendulum swinging in perfect rhythm, though Thomas couldn't hear it ticking. "I am Mrs. Helena Vance," the veiled woman said, closing the door behind him. "I manage the inn. Your room is prepared on the second floor, number 7. Dinner will be served at 8 o'clock. Thomas set down his trunk, studying her carefully. "I appreciate the hospitality, Mrs. Vance. I must admit, I'm here on a particular assignment. I'm a journalist, and I've heard stories about this place." "Stories?" She tilted her head slightly, the veil shifting but never revealing what lay beneath. "Yes, stories tend to follow certain places, follow certain people." She moved toward a desk where a leather-bound guest registry lay open. "But you'll find that truth is often more complicated than the tales people tell." She extended a fountain pen toward him. If you would sign the registry, please. We keep careful records here. Thomas approached the desk and opened the book. The pages were filled with names, dates, room numbers, a standard guest log. But as he scanned the entries, something caught his attention. Many of the dates were incomplete. Guests had checked in, but there were no checkout dates beside their names. "Mrs. Vance," he said slowly, "why do so many entries lack departure dates?" "Some guests," she replied, her voice unchanged, "prefer to leave quietly. Early morning departures. We respect their privacy." Thomas wrote his name, noting how the ink seemed unusually dark against the yellowed paper. "And the guests who've reportedly disappeared? What about them?" Helena Vance stood perfectly still, her hands clasped once more. "Disappeared is such a dramatic word, Mr. Whitmore. People come here seeking refuge, seeking escape from their troubles. Sometimes they find what they're looking for. Sometimes they simply move on." A door opened somewhere upstairs, a soft click followed by silence. "That would be Mr. Caldwell," Helena said. "Another guest. You'll meet him at dinner." She picked up a brass key from the desk. "Room 7, second floor, last door on the left. I trust you'll find it comfortable." Thomas took the key, its metal cold against his palm. "Thank you. Before I go up, may I ask why you wear the veil?" For a moment, the air seemed to thicken. The lamp flames dimmed slightly, then returned to normal. "Some questions, Mr. Whitmore, have answers that are better discovered than told." Helena turned toward a darkened hallway. "Dinner at 8. Please don't be late. We value punctuality here at Pine Hollow Inn." She glided away, her movements so smooth she seemed to float rather than walk. Thomas watched until she disappeared into the shadows, leaving him alone in the lobby with only the silent clock for company. He climbed the stairs, each step creaking despite the well-maintained appearance of the inn. The second-floor corridor stretched longer than it should have, lined with doors numbered 1 through 10. Gas lamps flickered along the walls, casting dancing shadows that seemed to move independently of the flames. Room 7 was at the far end, just as Helena had said. Thomas unlocked the door and stepped inside. The room was modest but clean. A single bed with a patchwork quilt, a writing desk positioned near the window, a wardrobe, and a wash basin. The window overlooked the forest, though night had fallen completely now, rendering the view nothing more than a black void pressed against the glass. Thomas set his trunk down and immediately went to the desk, pulling out his notebook and pencil. He began writing his initial observations. The incomplete registry, the veiled proprietress, the unnatural quiet of the place. As a journalist, he'd learned to trust his instincts, and every instinct was screaming that something was profoundly wrong here. A knock at the door made him jump. "Yes?" he called out. "Mr. Whitmore?" A male voice, older, weathered. "It's Caldwell. Mrs. Vance mentioned you'd arrived. Thought I'd introduce myself before dinner." Thomas opened the door to find a man in his 50s, thin and pale, with dark circles under his eyes that spoke of sleepless nights. His suit was expensive but rumpled, his tie loosened. "Robert Caldwell," the man said, extending a shaky hand. I'm glad there's someone else here, someone new." They shook hands, and Thomas noticed how cold Caldwell's skin felt. "How long have you been staying here, Mr. Caldwell?" Caldwell's eyes darted down the hallway, then back to Thomas. I'm not entirely sure anymore. Days blend together in this place, but I need to warn you. Mr. Caldwell." Helena Vance's voice cut through the air like a blade, though she was nowhere to be seen. "Dinner is ready. Both of you, please come down." Caldwell's face went white. He leaned closer to Thomas, whispering urgently, "Don't look under the veil. Whatever you do, don't try to see her face, and don't trust the silence." "Mr. Caldwell," Helena's voice again, closer now. "We're waiting." The older man stepped back, his hands trembling. "We should go," he said at normal volume, all urgency gone. "We shouldn't keep her waiting." Thomas followed Caldwell down the stairs, his journalist's mind racing with questions. The dining room was small but elegant, a single table set for three. Helena Vance sat at the head, her veil intact, a plate of untouched food before her. "Please, sit," she gestured to the chairs. "I've prepared a modest meal. Roasted chicken, vegetables from our garden, fresh bread." The food looked and smelled delicious, but Thomas noticed that Caldwell barely touched his plate, pushing the food around with his fork while casting nervous glances at Helena. "So, Mr. Whitmore," Helena said, her veiled face turned toward him, "what brings a journalist to our quiet establishment? Surely there are more exciting stories in Philadelphia." Thomas decided on directness. "I've heard reports of unusual occurrences here. Guests who vanish, strange sounds in the night, and of course the mystery of the proprietress who never shows her face." "Ah," Helena's hands remained folded on the table. "And you believe you'll uncover some scandal, some trick?" "I believe in facts," Thomas replied, "and the facts suggest that something here deserves investigation." A long silence followed. The grandfather clock in the lobby chimed 8 times, each note hanging in the air longer than it should. "Very well," Helena finally said. "Investigate. Search the rooms, examine the records, speak with Mr. Caldwell. I have nothing to hide." She stood smoothly. "But I offer you one piece of advice, Mr. Whitmore. Some truths are too heavy to carry. Some secrets were buried for the protection of those who would dig them up." She left the dining room without another word, her black dress whispering against the floor. Thomas turned to Caldwell. "Now, tell me everything." The older man waited until Helena's footsteps had completely faded before speaking. His hands shook as he reached for his water glass, taking several long sips before setting it down with a soft clink. "I came here 2 months ago," he began, his voice barely above a whisper. "Maybe longer. Time works differently in this place, Mr. Whitmore. Days feel like weeks, nights stretch into eternities." He glanced toward the doorway, ensuring they were alone. "I'm a banker from Pittsburgh." "Was a banker. I came here because I needed to disappear for a while. Financial troubles, the kind that destroy lives." Thomas leaned forward, listening intently. "The first week was normal," Caldwell continued. "Pleasant even. Mrs. Vance was courteous. The meals were good, the room comfortable. I thought I'd found the perfect refuge. But then I started noticing things. Small things at first." "What kind of things?" "The clock in the lobby never makes a sound, yet it always shows the correct time. The paintings on the walls, they change, not dramatically but subtly. A figure that was in the background moves closer to the foreground. A door that was closed becomes open." Caldwell's voice dropped even lower. "And at night, I hear footsteps. In the hallway outside my room. Slow, deliberate footsteps that stop right outside my door. Have you seen who it is?" "Once." I opened the door. Caldwell's hands were shaking now. She was standing there, Mrs. Vance, just standing in complete darkness, her veil somehow even blacker than the shadows around her. She didn't move, didn't speak, just stood there watching me. Or at least, I think she was watching. I couldn't see her eyes, but I could feel them. Thomas felt the hairs on the back of his neck rise. "What did you do?" "I closed the door, locked it. But here's the thing, Mr. Whitmore. When I tried to open it again the next morning, it wouldn't budge, not from the inside. It was as if the lock had been reversed." Caldwell rubbed his face wearily. "When Mrs. Vance finally opened it at breakfast time, she acted as if nothing had happened, said I must have been dreaming. But you weren't." "No, I wasn't." Caldwell looked directly at Thomas. "And I'm not the first. There were others when I arrived. A traveling salesman, a young widow, an older couple celebrating their anniversary. All of them left suddenly, in the middle of the night, according to Mrs. Vance. But I never heard them leave. Never saw them pack. One morning, they simply weren't here anymore." Thomas absorbed this information, his investigative instincts fully engaged now. "Have you tried to leave yourself?" Caldwell's laugh was bitter. every single day. But something always stops me. Sometimes it's practical. My carriage never arrives when scheduled. Sometimes it's psychological, a feeling of overwhelming dread whenever I approach the front door. And sometimes, he paused, struggling with his words. Sometimes I can't remember why I want to leave at all, like my mind gets foggy. That's not natural. Nothing about this place is natural, Mr. Whitmore. Caldwell stood abruptly. I should go to my room. Mrs. Vance doesn't like it when I stay up too late. Says it's bad for my health. He gripped Thomas's shoulder. Be careful. Don't drink anything she gives you. Don't eat the food left in your room at night. And whatever you do, don't go to the 3rd floor after dark. Why? What's on the 3rd floor? But Caldwell was already walking away, his footsteps echoing in the empty hallway. Thomas couldn't sleep. He lay in bed in room 7, staring at the ceiling, listening to the inn settle around him. Every creak of wood, every whisper of wind against the windows seemed laden with meaning. His pocket watch sat on the nightstand, its ticking the only reliable sound in a place where silence itself felt predatory. At precisely midnight, the footsteps began, slow, methodical, moving down the 2nd floor hallway. Thomas sat up, his heart pounding. The footsteps grew closer, passing door after door, until they stopped directly outside room 7. He held his breath, waiting. Nothing. No knock. No voice. Just the sensation of being observed through solid wood. Then, softly, almost tenderly, Thomas. His name, spoken in Helena Vance's voice, but different somehow. Younger, sadder. Don't be afraid. I only want to help you understand. Understand what? Thomas called out, surprising himself with his boldness. A long pause. Why some doors should never be opened. Why some veils should never be lifted. Why some stories, the voice faded as if moving away, should remain unwritten. The footsteps resumed, moving away down the hall, descending the stairs, fading into silence. Thomas didn't sleep the rest of the night. When dawn finally broke, grey and reluctant, he rose and dressed. His reflection in the wash-basin mirror looked haggard, dark circles already forming under his eyes. He splashed cold water on his face and ventured downstairs. The dining room was empty, but a single-place setting waited at the table. Fresh coffee steamed in a porcelain cup, scrambled eggs, toast and bacon arranged on fine china. A folded newspaper, yesterday's Philadelphia Chronicle, sat beside the plate. Thomas sat down slowly, examining the food. It looked and smelled delicious, but Caldwell's warning echoed in his mind. Don't eat the food left in your room at night. But this was morning, in the public dining room. Surely it was safe. He took a bite of eggs. They were perfect, fluffy, seasoned just right. He relaxed slightly, his hunger overtaking his caution. I hope everything is to your satisfaction. Helena Vance stood in the doorway. Thomas hadn't heard her approach. It's excellent, thank you, he managed, setting down his fork. She moved into the room with that same gliding motion, taking a seat at the far end of the table. I understand you spoke with Mr. Caldwell last night. He's a troubled man, I'm afraid. The stress of his financial situation has taken quite a toll on his mental state. He seemed lucid enough to me. Did he? Helena tilted her head. Tell me, Mr. Whitmore, what exactly did he say about this place? Thomas hesitated, choosing his words carefully. He mentioned that other guests have left suddenly. That time seems to work differently here. That you walk the hallways at night. I do walk the hallways at night, Helena confirmed. I suffer from insomnia, you see. A consequence of old trauma. As for the other guests, yes, some choose to leave without notice. It's not uncommon for people seeking refuge to depart just as suddenly as they arrive. She paused. And time? Well, when one is isolated from the rhythms of city life, days and weeks do tend to blur together. Reasonable explanations, Thomas said. Almost too reasonable. Would you prefer unreasonable ones? Tales of ghosts and curses. There was a hint of amusement in her voice. I'm afraid reality is often more mundane than the stories we tell ourselves. Thomas leaned forward. Then why the veil, Mrs. Vance? If everything here is so ordinary, why hide your face? The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. My face was badly burned in a fire many years ago, Helena said quietly. The scarring is severe. I wear the veil out of courtesy to my guests, to spare them discomfort. Is that unreasonable? No, Thomas admitted, but it is theatrical, and theatre always has an audience. Perceptive, Helena stood. Since you're so interested in the truth, Mr. Whitmore, why don't you spend the day exploring? The library has extensive records of the inn's history. The grounds are peaceful, if somewhat overgrown. And if you're truly brave, the third floor has several unoccupied rooms that might interest a man of your curiosity. I thought guests weren't allowed on the third floor. I never said that. Mr. Caldwell has his own fears, his own superstitions, but you're a journalist, a seeker of facts. Surely you're not afraid of an empty hallway. She moved toward the door. I'll be in the study if you need anything. Otherwise, consider yourself free to investigate as you wish. She left, and Thomas sat alone with his cooling breakfast and racing thoughts. He spent the morning in the library, a dusty room lined with books and filing cabinets. Most of the volumes were ordinary, novels, reference books, agricultural manuals, but in a cabinet in the corner he found what he was looking for: records. Guest registries dating back 12 years to when Pine Hollow Inn first opened, ledgers showing expenses and income, and a series of leather-bound journals unlabeled. Thomas opened the first journal, recognizing Helena Vance's handwriting immediately. October 3rd, 1887. Today, I begin again. The fire took everything, my home, my husband, my old life. But from those ashes I will build something new. This inn will be a sanctuary, a place where the lost can find refuge. I will make it perfect. I will make it safe. The early entries were mundane. Notes about construction, furniture purchases, hiring staff. But as Thomas read further, the tone began to shift. January 15th, 1888. The first guests arrived today. A young couple, newly married. They seemed happy. I envy them that innocence. They don't know yet that happiness is temporary, that everything beautiful eventually burns. March 22nd, 1888. The couple left in the night. No payment, no goodbye, just gone. It's better this way. Some people aren't meant to linger in places like this. June 8th, 1888. Another guest departed unexpectedly. Mr. Harrison, the traveling merchant. He'd been asking too many questions, wandering the hallways at odd hours. Some guests don't understand boundaries, don't understand that privacy is sacred. The pattern repeated through the years. Guests arriving, guests leaving suddenly. Helena's commentary growing increasingly detached, almost cold. Then, in an entry from last year, November 12th, 1898. Mr. Caldwell arrived today. He's running from something, I can always tell. They come here thinking they can escape their pasts, but the past is patient. It waits. It watches. Eventually, everyone faces what they're running from. Even me. Thomas's hands were trembling as he read the most recent entry, dated just 3 days ago. October 28th, 1899. A journalist from Philadelphia has written requesting accommodation, Mr. Thomas Whitmore. He wants to investigate the disappearances. How amusing. He thinks he's hunting a story, but really he's walking into one. I wonder if he'll be brave enough to read it to the end. She'd known he was coming, not just expected. Known. Thomas felt a chill run down his spine. A sound from above made him look up. Footsteps on the third floor, moving slowly across the ceiling. Heavy footsteps, too heavy to be Helena's. Thomas closed the journal and left the library, climbing the stairs to the second floor, then continuing up to the third. The third floor hallway was narrower than the others, the ceiling lower. 8 doors lined the corridor, 4 on each side, all closed. At the far end, a window overlooked the forest, its glass so dirty that daylight barely penetrated. Thomas walked slowly down the hall, trying each door. Locked. All of them locked except one, the door at the very end, on the right. It swung open at his touch, revealing a room identical to his own on the second floor. Same bed, same desk, same wardrobe. But this room felt different, colder, more oppressive. On the desk sat a leather satchel, covered in dust. Thomas approached it carefully, opening the clasp. Inside, a wallet containing identification papers for a Mr. James Harrison, a merchant from Harrisburg, the same Mr. Harrison mentioned in Helena's journal from 1888. Beneath the wallet, more identification papers. Different names, different faces, all guests mentioned in the journal. All people who'd supposedly left the inn suddenly, but their belongings were still here, their identities left behind like shed skin. "They didn't leave, did they?" Thomas whispered to the empty room. "No," Helena's voice came from the doorway. "They didn't." Thomas spun around to find her standing there, her veil perfectly in place, her hands folded calmly at her waist. "You're not even surprised I'm here," he said. "I've been watching you all morning, Mr. Whitmore. I told you, this is my inn. I know everything that happens within these walls." She stepped into the room. "You wanted the truth. Now you're beginning to understand it. What did you do to them, to all of these people?" Helena was quiet for a long moment. Then slowly, she moved to the window, looking out at the forest. "I didn't do anything," she said softly. "The inn did. Or rather, what lives in the inn. What's always lived here long before I built these walls." "That's not an answer, isn't it?" She turned to face him. "Tell me, Mr. Whitmore, what do you know about this land? About the history of Pine Hollow?" "Nothing. It's just forest." "No place is just anything." Helena's voice took on a strange quality, almost hypnotic. "This land has a history. Before my inn, there was a settlement here. Before the settlement, the indigenous tribes avoided this place, called it cursed, said the earth was hungry here, that it consumed those who stayed too long. Superstition. Is it? You've been here less than a day, and already you feel it, don't you? The weight, the wrongness, the sense that something is watching, waiting, measuring you." She moved closer. "I came here to escape my past, to build something new. But you can't escape the land itself. You can only coexist with it." Thomas backed toward the door. "You're insane." "Perhaps. Or perhaps I'm the sanest person you'll ever meet, because I've accepted the truth that others refuse to see." Helena tilted her head. "The guests who came here, they were all running from something. Guilt, debt, shame, grief. The inn fed on that darkness, fed on their desperation, and when it had taken enough," she gestured to the satchel, "it didn't need them anymore." "Fed on them how?" "Slowly, subtly. Dreams that grew darker each night. Memories that began to fade, the sense of self eroding like water wearing away stone. Until one day, they simply weren't anymore. The body remained functioning, breathing, but the person inside was gone, consumed by whatever dwells in the foundation of this place." Thomas's hand found the doorknob behind him. "And you just allowed this to happen?" "Allowed?" Helena laughed bitterly. "I didn't allow it, Mr. Whitmore. I fed it. I brought them here, these broken, desperate souls. I made them feel safe, comfortable. And then I watched as the inn took what it needed. Because if I didn't..." She paused. "If I didn't feed it others, it would feed on me. That's monstrous." "Yes," Helena agreed simply. "It is. But I've already lost everything once. I won't lose myself too. So I make a choice every day, them or me, and every day I choose me." Thomas yanked the door open and ran. Thomas burst into Caldwell's room without knocking, his breath coming in ragged gasps. The older man sat on his bed, staring at the wall with vacant eyes. "Caldwell." Thomas grabbed his shoulders, shaking him. "We need to leave. Now." She admitted everything. "This place is killing people." Caldwell blinked slowly, his gaze focusing on Thomas, as if seeing him for the first time. "Leave." He said the word like it was foreign. I can't remember why I'd want to leave. Because you're dying here. Don't you understand? She's keeping you here, feeding you to this thing in the walls. Thomas pulled Caldwell to his feet. "How long have you really been here? Not days or weeks. Tell me the truth." Ajay Caldwell's face contorted with effort, like a man trying to recall a dream. There was snow. When I arrived, heavy snow. That was..." His eyes widened with sudden horror. "February. I arrived in February, but that was 9 months ago. How can that be 9 months ago? Because she's been draining you, making you forget. We have to go, both of us, right now." Thomas dragged Caldwell into the hallway toward the stairs, but as they descended to the second floor, the walls began to change. The wallpaper rippled, patterns shifting and reforming. The gaslights flickered, their flames turning strange colors, green, blue, purple. "You can try to leave," Helena's voice echoed from everywhere and nowhere, "but the inn doesn't like to lose its guests." The front door appeared at the end of the first-floor hallway, but the hallway itself seemed to stretch, growing longer with each step they took. The grandfather clock in the lobby began to chime, but instead of normal bells, the sound was distorted, almost organic, like a heartbeat slowing down. "Don't listen to it," Thomas said, half carrying Caldwell now. "Don't look at the walls. Just keep moving." They reached the door. Thomas grabbed the handle and pulled. Locked. "No, no, no!" He yanked harder, threw his shoulder against it. The wood didn't budge. "Mr. Whitmore." Helena stood at the base of the stairs, her veil perfectly in place. Behind her, the stairs seemed to writhe like living things. "You can't leave. Not anymore. You've learned too much, seen too much. The inn has tasted you, and it's decided it wants more." "Open this door," Thomas shouted. "I don't control the doors. Not anymore. This place has its own will, its own hunger. I'm just the caretaker." She moved closer. "But I can offer you a choice. Stop fighting. Accept what's happening. Let yourself fade gradually, painlessly, or resist, and make your final days agonizing." Caldwell suddenly wrenched himself from Thomas's grip and stumbled toward Helena. "Please," he begged. "Please, I just want to go home. I have a wife. Martha. I need to see Martha." Helena regarded him with something that might have been pity. "Martha has already begun to forget you, Mr. Caldwell. It's been 9 months. She's mourning, yes, but she's also moving on. That's what the living do. They forget." "No," Caldwell collapsed to his knees. "No, that can't be true. The inn took your memories," Helena continued, almost gently. "Now it's taking hers. Every letter you think you've written, every thought you've had of her, the inn consumed them, fed them into the void. Soon you won't remember why you're crying." Thomas watched in horror as Caldwell's expression slowly emptied, like water draining from a basin. The anguish faded, replaced by blank confusion, then nothing at all. "What have you done to him?" Thomas whispered. "I did nothing. The inn simply accelerated the process. He's gone now. The body remains, but Robert Caldwell has been consumed." Helena turned her veiled face toward Thomas. "You could have left this morning, but you stayed. You investigated. You insisted on knowing the truth, and now the inn knows you, has marked you. You belong here now. I refuse to believe that. I refuse to accept." The floor beneath Thomas's feet suddenly felt wrong. Too soft, like flesh. He looked down and saw that the wooden planks had taken on an organic quality, pulsing gently as if breathing. The walls weren't walls anymore, but membranes, translucent enough that he could see shapes moving behind them. Human shapes, dozens of them, pressed against the membrane like insects preserved in amber. "Do you see them?" Helena asked. "All the guests who came before. The inn doesn't just consume consciousness, Mr. Whitmore. It preserves it, traps it in the space between. They're aware, always aware, but unable to move, unable to speak, unable to die, eternal witnesses to their own dissolution. Thomas staggered backward, his mind struggling to process what he was seeing. Among the shapes, he recognized faces from the identification papers he'd found: the merchant, the young widow, the celebrating couple, all of them frozen in silent screams. "This isn't possible," he said, though conviction had fled his voice. "You keep saying that word, possible, as if reality cares about what you believe." Helena moved to one of the walls, pressing her hand against it. The membrane rippled at her touch. "I learned the truth 12 years ago, when I built this inn on cursed ground. When the land claimed its first guest, I tried to run, tried to burn it down, but the inn wouldn't let me. It needed a caretaker, someone to bring it food, and in exchange, it promised to spare me, to let me keep my consciousness, my memories, myself. So you became its accomplice. I became its servant. There's a difference." Helena's voice was hollow. "Every guest I bring here, every soul I feed to this place, I do it knowing exactly what I'm doing. That's not complicity, Mr. Whitmore, that's damnation." Thomas forced himself to focus, to think like a journalist again. There has to be a way to stop it, to destroy it. "Fire," Helena said immediately. "The only thing that might work. Burn it all to ash. Let the cursed ground return to forest, but even that's not guaranteed. Fire is how I lost my first life. I'm not certain I'd survive losing my second." "Then we burn it," Thomas said. "Tonight, before it can take anyone else." Helena stood very still. "You'd condemn me in the process. You've condemned yourself, and dozens of others." Thomas moved closer, surprising himself with his boldness. "But you can end it. You can choose to stop being the monster you've become." For a long moment, silence. Even the pulsing floor seemed to quiet, as if the inn itself were listening. Then Helena laughed, a broken, desperate sound. "You think I'm afraid of burning? I've been burning for 12 years, Mr. Whitmore. Every moment of every day, I feel the flames that took my husband, my home, my old life. What's one more fire?" She moved to a cabinet near the stairs, pulling out a container. "Kerosene. I've kept this here, for emergencies, for courage, wondering every day if I'd finally use it." "Then help me," Thomas said. "Help me end this. Free those people trapped in the walls. Free yourself." Helena set the kerosene down. "You don't understand what you're asking. If we burn the inn with them still inside, we don't free them. We trap them in their worst nightmare, burning forever, just as they're already screaming forever. The only way to truly release them is to break the connection first." "How?" "The inn feeds through a focal point, a source, something that anchors it to this reality." Helena moved to the floor, kneeling and tracing a pattern in the dust. "It's in the cellar. I've never had the courage to go down there, to see what it really is. But I know it exists. Destroy that, and the inn loses its power. The souls trapped here would be released, and then we could burn what remains." Thomas looked at the cellar door, a nondescript entrance near the back of the main floor. He'd noticed it earlier, but assumed it was just storage. "What's down there?" he asked. "I don't know, and that terrifies me more than anything else." Helena stood. "But if you're truly committed to this, if you truly want to end what I've allowed to continue, then we go together, now. Before I lose my nerve, before the inn realizes what we're planning." Thomas retrieved his notebook and pencil from his pocket. Useless tools now, but holding them gave him courage. "If we don't survive this—" "We won't," Helena interrupted. "Even if we succeed in destroying the inn, the process will kill us. That's the price. Are you willing to pay it?" Thomas thought of his mother in Philadelphia, his editor, his career, all the things he'd never do, never write, never experience. He thought of the faces trapped in the walls, suffering endlessly. He thought of Caldwell's empty shell, still breathing, but no longer alive. "Yes," he said, "I'm willing." Helena picked up the kerosene. "Then let's go to the cellar. Let's see what nightmare has been feeding on human souls for God knows how long. and let's end it." She opened the cellar door. Darkness spilled out like liquid, thick and wrong. Stairs descended into absolute blackness, not the mere absence of light, but a darkness that seemed to have substance, weight. Helena lit a lamp. The flames struggled against the dark, barely penetrating a few feet ahead. Together, they descended into the hungry earth. The cellar stairs seemed to go on forever, descending far deeper than should be possible for a three-story building. Thomas counted 47 steps before losing track, the darkness pressing against his mind like physical pressure. The air grew thick and cold, carrying a smell that reminded him of old earth and older things, decay mixed with something metallic, like blood left to oxidize. Helena led the way, her lamp held high, her free hand trailing along the earthen wall. The stairs weren't wood or stone, but packed dirt, carved directly into the ground. Strange symbols were etched into the walls at regular intervals, not letters or words, but geometric patterns that hurt to look at directly. "These markings," Thomas whispered, his voice seeming too loud in the suffocating quiet. "What are they?" "I don't know. They were here when I first descended 12 years ago, after the first guest disappeared. I think they're older than this country, older than the settlements, maybe older than memory itself." Helena's voice was steady, but Thomas heard the fear beneath. Something was worshipped here once, or imprisoned. I've never been certain which. Finally, after what felt like hours, but could only have been minutes, the stairs ended. They stepped into a cavern, natural stone rising into darkness above them. The lamplight revealed a chamber roughly circular, perhaps 30 feet in diameter. At the center stood a structure. Thomas's mind struggled to process what he was seeing. It looked like an altar, but made from materials that shouldn't exist together. Wood that seemed to grow directly from stone. Metal that pulsed with organic rhythm. Crystalline formations that looked like frozen screams. And embedded throughout, human possessions. Watches, jewelry, spectacles, wedding rings, photographs, hundreds of items, maybe thousands, each one marking a person who'd been consumed by whatever dwelt here. "Dear God," Thomas breathed. "God abandoned this place long ago," Helena said quietly, "if he was ever here at all." As they approached, the altar seemed to pulse in response to their presence. The air vibrated with a low frequency that Thomas felt in his bones. The temperature dropped further, their breath misting in the lamplight. Behind the altar, the cavern wall was different. Not stone, but something else. The same organic membrane Thomas had seen upstairs. But here it was, massive, covering the entire back of the chamber. And within it, pressed against the translucent surface like butterflies pinned to cork, were the consciousnesses of every person the inn had consumed. Not dozens, hundreds, maybe more. Their faces were visible through the membrane, mouths open in silent screams, eyes wide with eternal awareness. Thomas recognized recent faces, the guests from Helena's journal. But there were older ones too. Their features faded like old photographs, extending back decades, centuries even. "This predates your inn by a long time," Thomas said, his voice shaking. "Yes." Helena moved closer to the membrane, her lamp casting dancing shadows across the trapped faces. "I didn't create this. I just perpetuated it, fed it, kept it alive when perhaps it should have been allowed to starve and die." One of the faces suddenly focused on Helena. Thomas saw the moment of recognition, saw the mouth form a word. "You." "I'm sorry," Helena whispered to the trapped soul. "I'm so sorry." Thomas forced himself to approach the altar. Up close, he could see that it was the source of the inn's power. Tendrils of that organic material extended from it into the earth, into the walls, spreading throughout the structure above like roots or veins. "If we destroy this," he said, "what happens? The connection breaks, the souls are released, and the inn above." Helena set down the kerosene container. "The inn will die, violently. Everything it's been holding together will collapse inward." We'll be buried, but it will be over. Thomas examined the altar more closely. Among the embedded possessions, he spotted something that made his blood run cold. A wedding ring engraved with the initials JV. "Your husband," he said. "Jonathan Vance. He's here too." Helena's hand trembled, the lamp shaking. "What?" "This ring. It was his." Thomas pried it free from the altar. The metal was warm, pulsing with that same organic rhythm. "He didn't die in the fire, did he? He came here, found this place, and it took him." "No!" Helena's voice broke. "No, he died in the fire. I saw his body. I buried—" "You buried something," Thomas interrupted gently. "But maybe not him. Maybe the fire drove him out of your home. Maybe he found this place, this thing. Maybe it called to him." Helena sank to her knees, the lamp nearly falling from her grip. All these years I thought I was running from his death. But he's been here, trapped here, conscious here." Thomas looked at the membrane, searching among the hundreds of faces, and there, pressed against the surface, faded with time, but still recognizable from the wedding photograph Thomas had seen in Helena's journal, was Jonathan Vance. His eyes found Helena, and his mouth formed words. "End it. Please, end it." "He wants to be free," Thomas said softly. "They all do." Helena stood slowly, wiping tears that had somehow found their way beneath her veil. "Then we free them." She picked up the kerosene, moving toward the altar with newfound purpose. "Mr. Whitmore, I need you to do something for me." "What?" "When I tell you, run. Get to the stairs and climb as fast as you can. The collapse will be rapid, but you might make it to the surface. You might survive. I'm not leaving you." "Yes, you are." Her voice was firm. "Someone needs to tell this story. Someone needs to remember what happened here, even if they can never prove it. That someone is you." "Helena, please." She turned to face him, and for the first time she reached up and lifted her veil. Thomas had braced himself for scars, for disfigurement. What he saw was worse. Her face was a palimpsest of features. Her own scarred tissue provided the base, but overlaid upon it were the faint impressions of other faces, Jonathan's and many others. The faces of every person she'd fed to the inn, imprinted upon her like guilt made visible. "This is what I've become," she said. "This is what I deserve. But you still have a chance at redemption. You tried to save Robert Caldwell. You tried to stop me. You chose truth over safety. That matters." Before Thomas could respond, Helena poured the kerosene over the altar. The liquid hissed and steamed as it made contact with the organic material. The entire structure shuddered, and from somewhere deep in the earth came a sound like a scream, not human, but aware. The membrane began to ripple violently. The trapped faces pressed forward, their mouths opening wider, and Thomas realized he could hear them now, a chorus of whispers, all saying the same thing: "Free us, burn it, end this." Helena struck a match. "Run, Thomas, run now." "Not without you." She threw the match. The altar ignited with a roar that shook the cavern, but this wasn't normal fire. It was the wrong color, wrong temperature, wrong everything. It burned upward and inward simultaneously, consuming the organic material with an almost sentient hunger. The membrane began to tear, and as it did, something poured out. Not liquid or gas, but pure consciousness. Decades of trapped souls escaping all at once. The sensation of their release hit Thomas like a physical force, driving him to his knees. He saw their lives flash through his mind. The merchant who'd stopped at the inn just for one night. The widow seeking solace. The celebrating couple on their anniversary. Jonathan Vance, convinced he'd found something extraordinary in this cavern. Hundreds more, spanning generations. All of them grateful. All of them finally free. "Go!" Helena screamed as the cavern ceiling began to crack. Thomas ran. He hit the stairs as the first chunks of earth and stone began to fall. Behind him, the fire spread impossibly fast, racing up the walls, consuming the tendrils that fed the inn above. He climbed blindly, his lungs burning, his legs screaming. The stairs themselves began to crumble beneath his feet, each step disintegrating moments after he left it. Above, he heard the inn collapsing in on itself, 3 stories of carefully maintained illusion folding inward like a house of cards. He burst through the cellar door into the main floor just as the floor buckled. The walls were screaming now, an actual sound, high-pitched and agonized, as whatever consciousness had inhabited them for centuries felt death approaching. Thomas ran for the front door. It stood open now, the inn no longer strong enough to hold it closed. He dove through it as the entire structure collapsed behind him, imploding rather than falling, sucking itself down into the hungry earth it had been built upon. Thomas rolled across wet grass, coming to rest 20 yards from the inn. He turned to watch as Pine Hollow Inn died. The fire Helena had started had spread to the surface now, but it was already dying, having consumed its true target. What remained was just burning wood and normal flames. The inn was gone. The altar was destroyed. The membrane had torn completely. The souls were free. In the firelight, Thomas thought he saw figures emerging from the flames, translucent, barely visible, but unmistakably human. They walked through the fire without burning, stepping out into the night air with expressions of profound relief. He saw Jonathan Vance reuniting with other spirits, the merchant and the widow, couples and families, all of them walking toward the forest, fading as they went, moving on to whatever came next. And last, he saw Helena Vance. Her spirit stood at the edge of the flames, looking back at Thomas. Her face was clear now, unmarked, beautiful. She smiled, the first time he'd seen her smile, and mouthed 2 words, "Thank you." Then she turned and walked into the forest, following her husband and all the others she'd helped condemn. Her form faded into the darkness, and she was gone. Thomas sat in the wet grass as dawn began to break, watching the last of the fire die. The rain that had threatened for days finally came, extinguishing the remaining flames. By the time the sun rose fully, there was nothing left of Pine Hollow Inn but a crater in the earth and scattered ash. Thomas walked for 3 hours before finding a road. Another hour before a farmer's cart came along and gave him a ride to the nearest town. He told a simple story. He'd been traveling, his carriage had broken down, he'd gotten lost in the forest. No one questioned it. Why would they? He sent a telegram to his editor in Philadelphia. Story fell through, returning home. Then he sent a second telegram, this one to Martha Caldwell in Pittsburgh. Your husband is free. He loved you until the end. He didn't expect her to understand, but he owed her something, even if it was just cryptic comfort. The journey home took 2 days. Thomas spent most of it staring out train windows, watching the landscape pass, trying to reconcile what he'd experienced with the rational world he'd always believed in. He'd been a journalist who dealt in facts, in provable truths. Now he carried knowledge that could never be proven, never be written, never be shared. When he finally reached Philadelphia, the city felt surreal. People going about their normal lives, unaware that monsters existed, that curses were real, that some places in the world were fundamentally wrong. His mother greeted him with tears and relief, asking why he looked so haggard, why he'd lost weight. He blamed illness, long travel, poor sleep. She accepted it because the alternative was unthinkable. His editor was less forgiving. You wasted the paper's money chasing ghost stories, Whitmore. I expected better from you. Thomas nodded, accepting the reprimand. What else could he do? Write an article about a cursed inn that consumed souls. Describe an organic altar buried beneath the earth. Explain that he'd helped release hundreds of trapped consciousnesses by burning everything to the ground. He'd be dismissed as mad, and perhaps he was. That night, alone in his small apartment, Thomas opened his notebook. The pages were mostly blank. He'd written very little during his time at Pine Hollow Inn. just scattered observations, fragments of conversation. He turned to a fresh page and began to write. Not an article, not a story for publication, just a record. Something for himself, to prove he hadn't imagined it all. He wrote for hours, documenting everything. Helena's confessions, the trapped souls in the walls, the altar in the cellar, the faces pressed against the membrane, Jonathan Vance's wedding ring. When he finished, as dawn was breaking once again, he read it over. Then he tore out the pages, folded them carefully, and placed them in an envelope. He sealed it, wrote a single word on the front, truth, and locked it in his desk drawer. Some stories weren't meant to be told, some truths were too heavy to share. Over the following weeks, Thomas tried to return to normal life. He took small assignments, local politics, business developments, human interest pieces, safe stories, comfortable stories, stories that made sense. But at night he dreamed of burning altars and trapped faces. He heard whispers in empty rooms. He saw shadows that moved independently of light sources. The inn was gone, but its mark remained. 3 months after his return, Thomas received a letter. No return address, postmarked from a small town in western Pennsylvania he'd never heard of. Inside was a single photograph, old, faded, taken with a camera from decades past. It showed a group of people standing in a forest clearing. Men and women in clothes from the early 1800s, their expressions solemn. They stood around a stone marker, crude but deliberate. Thomas couldn't read the inscription in the photograph, but he recognized the location, the clearing where Pine Hollow Inn had stood. On the back of the photograph, written in handwriting he recognized as Helena's. The curse predated me by over a century. I was just the latest caretaker. But you ended it. Thank you. Rest well, Thomas Whitmore. You earned it. HV. The letter also contained something else, a small leather pouch. Inside, Jonathan Vance's wedding ring, cleaned of the organic material, just gold and engraving now. Thomas held it up to the light, reading the inscription. Forever isn't long enough. J and H, 1882. He should have thrown it away, should have destroyed this last connection to that nightmare. Instead, he found himself putting it on a chain and wearing it around his neck, hidden beneath his shirt. A reminder, a warning, a memorial to the hundreds who'd suffered and the 2 who'd finally found the courage to end it. Thomas never wrote about Pine Hollow Inn, never spoke of it to anyone who'd believe him. But sometimes, late at night when sleep wouldn't come, he'd take out the photograph and study those serious faces from the 1800s. They'd known about the curse, had tried to mark it, to warn others, but people forget. Warnings fade, and evil is patient. He wondered if the destruction of the altar had truly ended the curse or merely wounded it. If the hungry earth beneath Pine Hollow was finally at peace or just sleeping, waiting for someone new to build upon it. These questions haunted him more than any ghost could. 6 months after his return, Thomas was approached by a woman at a public library. She was elderly, perhaps 70, with sharp eyes and a careful manner. "Excuse me," she said. "Are you Thomas Whitmore, the journalist?" "I am. I read your work. You're good at finding the truth in complicated situations." She handed him a card. "I wonder if you might investigate something for me. There's a boarding house in Maryland, run by a very private widow. People check in, but, well, you understand." Thomas looked at the card. An address, a name, a plea for help. His first instinct was to refuse, to run from anything that reminded him of Pine Hollow Inn. But then he thought of the faces in the membrane, the decades of suffering, Helena's final words. "Someone needs to remember." "Tell me more," he heard himself say. Because some stories needed to be stopped before they could be written. Some curses needed to be broken before they could spread. And some journalists, having seen the darkness, couldn't turn away from it anymore. Thomas Whitmore would never write about Pine Hollow Inn, but he would spend the rest of his life finding and stopping places like it, quietly, without publicity, without proof. Some truths were too dangerous to share, but they were too important to ignore. He touched the ring hanging beneath his shirt, feeling its weight, a reminder of what he'd survived, what he'd learned, what he'd become. The woman was still waiting for his answer. "Yes," Thomas said finally. "I'll investigate your boarding house. When do we start?" She smiled, relief flooding her features. "Tomorrow. Thank you, Mr. Whitmore. Thank you." As she left, Thomas gathered his things and prepared to leave the library. Outside, the sun was setting, casting long shadows across the Philadelphia streets. In those shadows, if you looked carefully, you might have seen faces, translucent, barely visible, watching, not threatening, not malevolent, just grateful. The souls Thomas had helped free would follow him for the rest of his life, not as haunting, but as guardians, silent witnesses to his new mission. He walked home through the gathering darkness, no longer afraid of what lurked in shadows. He'd seen the worst the world had to offer. He'd walked through literal hell and emerged on the other side. Whatever came next, he would face it, not as a journalist chasing stories, but as something else, something new, a hunter of the places where reality bent, a breaker of curses, a voice for the voiceless. The ring against his chest felt warm, as if Helena Vance herself was offering approval from wherever she'd gone. Thomas Whitmore smiled. It was a sad smile, haunted and weary. But it was also determined, because the work had just begun. And this time, he wouldn't run. This time he would fight. And in fighting, he would finally find the redemption he hadn't known he'd been seeking. The darkness was vast. The evil in the world was real and patient and hungry. But so was Thomas Whitmore, and he had nothing left to lose.